These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they're described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. We camped next to a tent that never stopped laughing. This happened back in 2015 or 2016 when my ex-boyfriend and I went camping in Mendocino, California. A few sites over was this tiny green one-person tent, the kind that barely fits a body. What struck me right away was how empty the site looked. No cooler, no chair, no lantern, no shoes outside. Just a little tent, zipped up tight. We went to bed, and sometime after 10 p.m. it started. Laughter. Not a group around a fire. Not drunk campers. And definitely not an animal. I know what barred owls and coyotes sound like. This was human laughter. At first I thought it was maybe a radio or a Bluetooth speaker. But it never stopped. Not once. All night long, until sunrise. Same tone, same rhythm, no pauses for breath. Too steady, too repetitive to be a person in psychosis or on drugs. It sounded mechanical like a loop. That's what makes it worse. Because if it wasn't someone actually laughing, then it was someone who had recorded laughter beforehand and brought it out into the woods to sit in that tiny tent in the dark and listen to it for hours. When we woke up around 6:30 to 7 a.m., the laughter was still going. We packed up fast and left without ever seeing who or what was inside. And even now, years later, I can't shake the thought that someone actually decided that was how they wanted to spend the night. A tent, a recording of endless laughter, and the silence of the woods around them. Let's not meet. Story 2. A creepy man on the bus at 5 a.m. My friend, 16, and I, 17F, had been drinking at our friend's place and were pretty drunk. At like 5 a.m., we finally decided to head home and took the first bus. However, when we climbed to the back of the bus, a guy, 60M, with a goofy hat immediately complimented my friend, saying they were good looking. Without thinking too much, my friend thanked him. As we sat down, the man joined us, sitting right next to me. He went on about how he was so drunk and proceeded to ask my friend for a drink. My friend accepted the offer for €5. However, the man continued the questions as he was looking for the bill in his pockets. He asked for my friend's name and at which stop we would get off. He would repeat the question over and over again, even though my friend told him that they were not comfortable with answering. That's when we actually started to realize the true nature of the situation. Fortunately, that's also when some younger guys decided to step in. They told him to move and to stop bothering us. He was very resistant, even though he eventually obeyed. He gave the drink back to my friend and went to sit elsewhere. This interaction caused a verbal fight between the man and the younger men. The younger men were also drunk and provoked the older man with some pretty bad insults. Even though the younger men had not handled the situation very well, we wished them good night and told them to take care when we hopped off the bus. Relieved, we started walking toward the tram stop, waited for a bit, got on a tram, and waited for it to leave. We both were low-key scared as hell still, but tried to brush it off. Then the worst-case scenario happened. I saw the man walking towards the door of our tram. He got on, keeping intense eye contact with us. This man had followed us to the tram. It could have not been a coincidence because he entered so much later than us. He had noticed that we had left the bus and made the last-minute decision to follow us. He literally walked towards us, fists clenched. I was sure he was going to hit me, so I raised my hand to protect my head. He just stood there for a moment while I waited for the punch. Luckily, it never came. He sat down very close to us and started talking about how he would kill those men and that he knew where they live. With text messages, my friend and I decided to get off a stop earlier than we had planned to. On the stop, we immediately started running until we reached a shady walkway where we could still see the stop. We stayed there silent for a moment until we were sure the man didn't also get off. After that, we walked through the forest to make sure he couldn't find us anymore. Finally, We made it back safely to my friend's place. But holy hell was I scared. Story 3. She acted like she belonged. She didn't. I want to preface this story with the day we moved into my new townhome. My brother and I had lived together for a long time, so moving in together wasn't unusual. On the very first morning in our new place, I stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. My brother followed me, and we were talking about football when he suddenly froze, pointing toward the wooden frame of our covered patio. Written in big black marker was my name, Ryan. Neither of us had friends or family over yet, because we moved everything ourselves. It hadn't been there the night before. We stood there, confused, but never figured out how it got there. Now, fast forward 2 months. One night, I went to a bar down the street with a good friend while my brother stayed home. It was a normal night. I left the bar, grabbed some food, and got back around 1 a.m. My brother was already asleep, so I ate, went upstairs with my German Shepherd, and crashed. The next morning, I noticed something immediately wrong. My bedroom door was wide open, and my dog wasn't in the room. That never happens. My brother doesn't enter my room when I'm asleep, and he definitely doesn't let my dog out. Still, I brushed it off until I went downstairs. The first thing my brother asked me was, "Did you bring someone home last night?" I told him no. His face instantly changed, fear, not confusion. He asked again, "Are you sure no one came back with you?" I swore I hadn't. I didn't even talk to anyone besides my friend. That's when he told me what happened. At around 3 a.m., he heard loud noises downstairs. Thinking I was putting together the IKEA desk I had just bought, he got out of bed to yell at me for being so loud. When he reached the landing halfway down the staircase, he flicked on the light. At the bottom of the stairs was a girl. She was standing there, calmly picking up my desk box that had fallen over. She leaned it against the wall, then looked straight up at him. Neither of them said a word. I asked why he didn't confront her or call the police. He said my German Shepherd was standing right next to her, completely relaxed, so he assumed she was someone I had brought home. What unsettled him most was that she didn't panic at all when she saw him. She acted like she belonged there. After locking eyes, she casually walked into the living room instead of going out the front door, which was literally 2 feet behind her. He turned the light off and went back to bed, deciding to ask me who she was in the morning. That's when everything clicked. My bedroom door had been wide open, and my dog wasn't with me. Whoever that girl was, at some point she had been in my room. Whoever you are, let's never meet. Story 4. Am I overreacting, or is my mailman creepy? This will be long so sorry in advance. I, 23F, have lived alone in a decently nice apartment in a nice neighborhood for 2 years now. For the most part, the mail gets delivered to the mailboxes at the front entrance of the building. Occasionally, packages are delivered straight to apartment doors, and it's pretty convenient. Well, about a year ago, I was home from work during the day BC. I took the afternoon off to go to a doc appointment. The doorbell rang, and I had a Ring camera. I saw it was the mailman, so I answered. I have this whole exchange on video. He was maybe in his 30s, white, short like 5'5"-ish, very large glasses, really disheveled thin hair. I opened the door, smiled, and said, "Thanks so much," and went to take the package. He stopped and stared at me like something was wrong. So I was like, "Oh, sorry, did you need to take a picture of the delivery or something?" And to my surprise, he said, "I know you. I've seen you before, and you can see on the camera my face changes, my body demeanor gets uncomfortable, and I move behind the door." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." I went to shut the door, but he raised his voice and took a step forward and said, "I've seen your name on your mail. I found you on Instagram." My face went white, and I froze. I said, "Me?" I was kind of like a deer in headlights. He said, "You're a person of interest on Instagram for me. Your account was private, but you're pretty." I said thanks, and slammed the door, locking it quickly. I was happy to know I caught the whole thing on video. I showed it to my then boyfriend, who agreed it was weird. A few days later, on Saturday, he's back at my door. He rang the bell about 10 times, waiting a few minutes, just staring. I answered him through the doorbell and said, "Hi, you could just leave any mail, thanks." What he said next made me shake. He said, "I actually don't have any mail for you today. I just wanted to say hi. Can I come in for a glass of water?" I decided to just not answer. I didn't know what to say. But then about 2 weeks go by. My then boyfriend stayed the night and slept in. I left early for work. I got a call around 10:30 from my BF. I won't believe what just happened, and to check the camera. I do. The mailman came. He rang the bell a few times, and my BF answered the door. The mailman took a step back, and my BF stood for a moment, and they stared at each other. He realized the mailman didn't have anything in his hands. He said, "Can I help you?" And the mailman said, "Where's the small girl who lives here?" I'm pretty petite. I'm slightly under 5 feet, 100 pounds. My BF was stunned and said, "I live here too. For now on, leave our packages downstairs," and slammed the door. I was really happy he said that. BC, truthfully, he didn't live with me full-time, maybe 2 nights a week. It seemed to work. I didn't see the mailman again at all, actually. My then BF and I broke up a few months ago. I completely forgot about the mailman until today. I was entering my building where he was exiting at the same time I was entering. He stared at me, and I went to walk by. He turned to walk after me and said, "Hey, I haven't seen that guy in a while who used to live with you. Did he move out?" I panicked and walked faster, grabbing my keys, but I lied and said, "Oh, he's around." And as I entered quickly, I said, "Hey, honey, I'm home," and slammed it fast. I lied, but something told me to make it clear I wasn't alone. Am I being dramatic or mean? Or is he creepy? Story 5. I was seeing a fake psychologist for years. For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible, where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family has told me about myself, and police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Ani. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Ani. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was someone I could trust. So I did. 7 years later, 14 years old, I admitted to her that I tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors: my mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, I never moved on from the horrors of my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Ani never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Ani's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Ani clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my Ani. Ani, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic, maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Ani started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me till this day. At the end of each session, Ani had started to invite me into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she has begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop, my mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to kill myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a shit ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting crossed-legged on the floor and wondering what the fuck these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Ani and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was in a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Ani, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Ani when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Ani's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then, and sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up. Every day, I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers, because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one. But when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother. Years ago, they have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts, why Ani didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said, why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night was, who is Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now. LMAO, what finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Ani's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions, why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why it said chemistry teacher with over 20 years, female. I admit that I cried like a baby that night, because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wished I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do, LOL. I decided to post about my experience, just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience with therapy becoming fucked up or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys, it gets better with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again. Story 6. I'm so glad I stayed in the car that night. This happened to me around a year ago, and it still haunts me. At the time, I, female 25, was visiting some friends. It was the middle of the week, but I was on vacation, so I stayed out late. Around 1 o'clock or 1:30 a.m., I got in my car to head home, about a 30-minute drive. I live in a small German town on a main street, but it's not very big. At night during the week, there's barely any traffic. Maybe 1 or 2 cars every now and then, that's it. A bit of context that might help. Coming from the direction I drove, you could see down the road for quite a while, maybe 600 to 700 meters, something around 2,000 feet. I rent a parking spot in an underground garage, shared with 10 other tenants. The garage entrance is tucked away beside the building and somewhat hidden by the surrounding houses. It isn't really visible unless you're standing right in front of it. Anyway, back to the story. I was driving home. It was a typical spring night. Everything was normal. I pulled into the driveway, stopped for a moment to open the garage door with my remote. Then I backed into my parking spot, which faces the entrance. I left the engine running as I rummaged in the center console. I can't even remember what for. Suddenly, when I looked up, there was a stranger standing there. A man, maybe 45 years old, about 3 meters, 10 feet, in front of my car, inside the garage, just staring at me. I was instantly terrified. Reflexively, I hit the lock button on my car. He shouted that I should give him my phone, saying his car had broken down and he needed to make a call. But I hadn't seen any broken down car or flashing hazard lights anywhere on the road. No car pulled over. Nothing. I was so frozen in shock that I just stared at him. He seemed to notice how confused I was. He added that the breakdown happened in the next town, which, by the way, is about an hour's walk away. Again, he told me to give him my phone, becoming louder and more aggressive. That's when I realized what he was not wearing, just knee-length checkered shorts and no shirt. It wasn't freezing outside, but it definitely wasn't warm enough to be standing around half naked. I yelled through the closed window that I couldn't help him and asked him to leave. He, still angry, said, "You don't need to be afraid of me. Just come and give me your phone." I told him I was sorry, but no, and that he needed to leave. He stared for a moment longer, then angrily walked out of the garage. I stayed in my car until the garage door was fully closed. Only then did I turn off the engine. I wanted to call a friend, but there's no reception in that garage. So I grabbed my keys and every bit of courage I had and sprinted to the door leading into the apartment hallway. It's a heavy door that jams sometimes. Thankfully, not that night. There's also a back entrance from outside to the garage, and I had no idea if that door was locked or if the man knew about it. Once inside, I ran to my ground floor apartment. The windows are somewhat shielded by a hedge leading to my terrace, but technically, it's still reachable from the street. Once inside, I locked everything, shut all the blinds, and just sat there for several minutes before calling a friend. I debated calling the police, but didn't, thinking they had more urgent matters to deal with since, actually, the man hadn't done anything to me. Looking back, I realized that was a mistake. But honestly, I was just completely rattled. I'm usually someone who's happy to help people. But he easily could have asked me to call someone from outside, or knock on a door somewhere, or anything other than following a young woman into a garage at night, half naked. That's just no. I've never seen him again, thankfully. But ever since that night, I hate parking there. I never get out of my car until the garage door is fully closed. And even then, I'm always on edge. I'm so grateful I kept the car running and locked the doors. I'm grateful my parking spot is right across from the entrance, so I had a clear view. I'm grateful the door didn't stick that night. And honestly, I'm so grateful I hadn't gotten out of the car earlier. I really don't want to imagine what could have happened if I had. Story 7. My dentist keeps adding more teeth to my mouth. It all started a month ago. I thought it would just be a routine teeth cleaning when my dentist called me into his office. It was sterile, pearly white, a big desk with a smiling family, and his board certification from Michigan clearly displayed above his chair. Dominic, right? My dentist, Dr. Lee, flashed a perfect white smile at me. Oh, yeah. I gave a quick half smile as I took a reluctant seat on his cushy brown visitor chair. Dr. Lee leaned back in his own desk chair, looking at a stack of X-rays he held over his head in the light. He clicked his tongue while slowly shaking his head. No, this won't do at all. Dominic? Oh, yes. I asked, trying to decipher his clear disappointment. What is this, your third, fourth time in my office? I gulped. I think it's my third. Right. Now, if you look right here. Dr. Lee pointed his finger at the X-ray, holding it up towards me. The fluorescent lights above made it nearly impossible to distinguish anything on the glossy paper. You see this? Not really, if I'm being honest. I chuckled. Dr. Lee's face remained unamused. Well, he exhaled and cleared his throat. This is your mouth. See anything wrong with it? I chanced to smile, trying everything in my power to break the awkwardness. Like I said, I really can't see. It's big, Dominic. Too big. My brows knitted themselves into confusion. Dr. Lee continued. An adult male has 32 teeth, the same as you. He paused. Don't worry, I counted yours myself. He chuckled to himself. Dominic, have you ever found yourself with difficulty chewing, difficulty swallowing food, or drinking water? I thought to myself at this revelation. Too big? What does that even mean? I don't think so, I responded, face still frozen in puzzlement. You're lucky, Dominic, very lucky. You see, I've had many patients with your exact issue. He pointed at me in a way I didn't like. They come to me with tears in their eyes. The pain, Dominic, for many. Dr. Lee wiped away the tears I couldn't see. It was too much, he said in a fractured voice. I nodded, my own hand feeling its way around my mouth, doing my best to familiarize myself with my big mouth. Luckily for you, Dominic, we have a new procedure that you would be a perfect candidate for. What is it, Dr. Lee? Mind racing, trying to understand how a big mouth could be so problematic. Well, it would be 3 rounds. It would fill out your smile, and once we start, we cannot stop. And if I don't do it, I'll have pain for the rest of my life. Dr. Lee looked at me glumly. I'm afraid so. I forced 2 fingers into my mouth. I guess it was pretty big. I fell towards the back. The sockets that used to be my wisdom teeth still seemed to have plenty of room back there. How embarrassing would it be to choke to death because of big mouth? Fine, I stuttered, let's do it. This is the right choice, Dominic. You could talk to Sandra up front for all the details. I signed a bundle of documents for oral spatial optimization, or OSO, as Sandra called it. My first appointment was next week. Dr. Lee was very strict. No food or water 12 hours before the procedure, with no alcohol allowed 48 hours before. It made me skip my Thursday office happy hour, but there would always be more. Dr. Lee sported a small fluorescent light on his forehead. He had me sit down in the patient chair, hooked me up to the gas mask, and by the count of 6, I was out cold. Dominic? Dr. Lee's voice summoned me back to consciousness. How are you feeling? I uttered with the intention of saying, I'm okay. A thumbs up or down will do, Dr. Lee laughed. Your teeth will need a few hours to set still. After I gave him a thumbs up, Dr. Lee continued. In 5 hours, you can remove the gauze. Brush your teeth with hot water tonight, got it? Microwaved water for 20 seconds should be fine. With that, he led me out the door. At 9 p.m. that night, I went to my bathroom and started pulling the gauze out of my mouth. Maybe it was in my head, but my mouth suddenly felt less full. I felt small bumps along my cheeks, small bumps, but overall everything seemed fine. I faced my mirror and I smiled. I quickly backpedaled in surprise. In front of every single one of my teeth sat an adjoining baby tooth sticking out of my gums. I looked at myself in horror, my breathing quick and ragged. My fingers felt deeper on both sides of my mouth, a ridge of baby teeth on the upper and lower parts of each. After counting them all, I found a total of 56 teeth. I tried to call the dentist, but of course, they were closed this late. Maybe it was all a bad dream. Maybe I'd wake up. No, this was real. I woke up the next day, calling in sick to work. I couldn't be seen like this. I stormed into Dr. Lee's building, pushing past the inquisitive questions of the reception desk and barreling into Dr. Lee's office. "What the hell did you do to me?" Dr. Lee looked up, recognized me, and then smiled. "Ah, Dominic, it looks like the procedure was a success. What are you talking about?" I bared my teeth, pointing at its new additions. "You turned me into a freak." Dr. Lee seemed to hesitate. "Maybe momentarily, but they will soon find their place in your mouth." "Did you at least apply the hot water?" "No, I didn't apply the hot water. Look what you did to me." I cried out. Dr. Lee seemed to smirk. "Now listen carefully, Dominic. It was all right to skip a day, but I need you to apply the hot water tonight. Got it?" I know it was probably a shocking surprise, but we are a team on this. Once we get through your other two procedures, you will have a smile worthy of your face. His eyes seemed sincere. "What are the other two procedures for?" I asked. "Look, Dominic, monitor your teeth for the next week. I am confident you will notice some changes. If you like what you see, I want you to come back on the 24th, got it?" "But Dash, now I'm quite busy today." "Dominic, think of the pain. This is necessary." He offered a solemn shoulder tap before disappearing into the hallway. I tried to pursue him, but found him gone when I emerged from his office. I retreated to the reception area, doing my best to hide my hideous new additions from onlookers. The next day, I hid my mouth from the world. The next day was much the same. However, by that Friday, 5 days after the procedure, my new additions seemed to slide into place along my gum line. I ran my tongue along my new tooth line. Food did seem easier to chew and swallow. It did seem easier to breathe. Maybe it was unrelated, but I did feel myself talking with more confidence, more assured of myself. Against all odds, I found myself walking back into Dr. Lee's office on the 24th. The reception greeted me. "That's a great smile," she exclaimed as she walked me back to Dr. Lee's operating room. "I knew you'd be back, Dominic." I smiled at him, taking a seat in the chair. This time, I only made it to the count of 5 when the room went dark. Dr. Lee slowly shook me awake. "Dominic, another success. Now you might be a little surprised when you take that gauze off tonight, but I don't think anything will quite be as surprising as that first night, huh?" I nodded, acutely aware that any words or sentences would be impossible with my mouth covered. "Now I want to take it off at let's say 9 p.m. again, okay?" I nodded. Dr. Lee looked more stern. "Dominic, this time, though, I want you to use cubes of ice to polish your teeth, okay? Oh, and no hot food for 2 days, got it?" I nodded again as he helped me to my feet. My mouth felt different. Weaker? No, heavier. Fuller. Different, but more, right? As the clock inched towards 9, I took my pilgrimage to the bathroom mirror. I looked at my gauze-covered mouth, took a breath, and slowly unwrapped my mouth. The face that stared back at me was one I didn't recognize. 2 large, curved top teeth dug in nearly to my lower level. Small, triangle-shaped teeth lined my gums, while my tongue felt another layer of sharp razor teeth tickling the inside of my mouth. I stood in awe. I let my fingers pull back my lips, trying to see my entire smile in the mirror. 80? 90? No, at least 100 teeth crowded my mouth. My fingers felt some of my new additions. Some were hard, some were soft, some were white, while some were yellow-tinged. I walked over to my fridge, grabbed a few ice cubes, and started to spread around the coldness, the soothing sensation working its way down my throat. I took a few deep breaths and had the most restful sleep I've had in years that night. The next morning, I called up Dr. Lee. "Everything to your liking, Dominic?" I let my tongue run across my new teeth. "Yes, Dr. Lee. When can we finish the procedure?" "Oh, let's see. Can you make the 31st work?" "I look forward to it, doctor," I replied, smiling to myself. I had saved up enough PTO days to sit in anticipation of my next appointment for the whole week. I was like a kid in a candy store, polishing and massaging each tooth, examining my smile with delight in the mirror, laughing and grinning to myself, confident with my smile for the first time in my life. But Dr. Lee had promised greater things, and I wanted greater. The air was hot and humid when my car pulled up to the office. I admire my smile one more time in the rearview mirror before climbing out of the car and heading towards the office. I flashed the receptionist a smile. Dominic for Dr. Lee. She was organizing some papers before she looked up. Her eyes went wide as I felt her gaze focus on my glorious smile. Juju just down the hall. She finally stuttered out, surely dumbstruck with jealousy. I enthusiastically found Dr. Lee and plopped down in the dentist's chair, eagerly awaiting my further refinement. "Everything okay, Dominic?" Dr. Lee asked as he readied the gas mask. "Couldn't be better, doctor. Couldn't be better." I'm not even sure he needed the gas. I would do anything needed to complete my journey. I felt the doctor's voice in my ears as I awoke from my drug-induced slumber. "Dominic, are you with us?" I held up a feeble thumb as my senses slowly returned. "Dominic, this final procedure has been a complete success. I think we will both be happy with your new smile." I felt my heart flutter. I let my fingers glide across my cheeks. They were also covered with gauze, a first, but something solid seemed to protrude from both sides. "Now keep the gauze in place for 12 hours, okay? We probably should have told you to eat before this. Apologize." I nodded. "Let me see anything else." Dr. Lee wondered aloud. "I don't think so. Let's schedule your checkup for 2 weeks from now to see how your mouth is doing, okay?" I nodded and nearly ran out of the office. The other patients stared at me down as I exited the office, but I didn't care. The 12 hours couldn't come by fast enough. It was the most agonizing wait in my life. Each minute felt like an hour, each hour like a day. My reflective TV screen seemed to mock me, each one of my house mirrors eager to reveal the secret of what was behind the gauze. By 2 a.m., I was huddled on my toilet seat, hungrily watching my watch clock slowly tick away to destiny. At 3:37 a.m., I finally rose to my feet and began to slowly unwind the gauze around my mouth. In a word, beautiful. 2 large tusks erupted from my upper gums, weaving their way into my cheeks. The ridge of the mouth, full of square, triangular, sharp, soft, flat, and bumpy teeth. My cheeks were a necklace of curved, sharp teeth that hooked into my mouth. Even my tongue, a forgotten, overlooked piece of my mouth, now sported a row of 4 square teeth on top of it and under it. I relaxed my jaw, letting me see my new smile in all its glory. There had to be 200, no, 300 teeth at least. I felt my body shaking with excitement. My tongue quickly felt around my mouth, content with its new neighbors. But then it found the spot. On the left side of my mouth, near the back, I felt the squishy reminder of my old mouth. I try not to panic. I forced myself to sleep. It was my first Saturday with my new mouth. I settled down for a bowl of cereal, the best meal of my life with my new mouth. I found my laptop and searched for Dr. Lee. He lived on the other side of town, but a visit from his favorite patient would surely make his weekend. The little blonde boy from the picture on his desk seemed to be playing in the dirt as my white Chevrolet pulled up next to their house. "Where's your daddy, little boy?" He was transfixed on the stick in his hand, slowly burrowing deeper into the soil, not even looking up at me. "He's in the house." I tousled his hair as I skipped up to the door. I rang the bell. The lady from the photo emerged from the door, her mouth agape as a small scream escaped her lips. "Hello, I'm looking for Dr. Lee." She started to slowly shake her head. "It's okay. I recognize you from his desk photo." I turned towards her front yard. "Same with your son." I smiled. "I just want to talk to him." She kept her gaze on me as she called out, "Honey." I saw Dr. Lee approaching. "Ah, Dominic, you're looking very good." I beamed a smile. "It's okay, honey." Dr. Lee grasped his wife's shoulder. "Dominic, why don't we talk in my study?" I followed him to the left side of his house. He offered me a brandy, something I turned down as I quickly pivoted our conversation toward why I came to him that Saturday. "I'm happy with the procedure, doctor, I really am, but I fear you missed a spot." He looked back at me with confusion, taking a sip from his glass. "What do you mean?" he asked. I opened my mouth wide, pointing toward the left side of my mouth. What's the problem?" He stuttered out, looking closely at my mouth and new teeth. I closed my mouth and looked at him calmly. "I need another tooth there." He flashed me a half smile. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Your mouth is fine now. You can breathe, eat, and drink more easily now, right?" I considered his question before nodding. I suppose, but I just want to feel. I thought of my next word, fuller is all. Dominic, you were quite okay. The 3 procedures worked, and you should be happy with the new smile you have. Some people just don't know when to play ball. I always liked Dr. Lee's smile. His wife's teeth weren't half bad either. It's amazing what a little determination and some homemade supplies will allow you to do. I think my mouth is taking kindly to the new additions, and I'll always have a piece of Dr. Lee to commemorate the person who believed I could be more. Story 8. I went to an abandoned lighthouse for clicks. My friend didn't come back. I'm not a writer. I don't have a degree, I don't have a Substack, and I definitely don't have a book deal. I'm just a person who went somewhere I shouldn't have gone, and I lost someone I care about. If you came here for flowery metaphors and clever twists, you won't find them. I'm just going to tell you why my life has gone to shit. If you live anywhere near the Northeast Coast, and you've ever thought about visiting Corvus Vale for urbex content, or just for a moody seaside getaway, don't. That's the short version. The long version is why I'm posting. I film abandoned places. It started as weekend therapy after a rough patch and turned into a small channel where I climb over fences, whisper, "Oh my God," at peeling wallpaper, and pretend I know anything about history. I've crawled through burnout terraces and drained leisure centers. I've stood on the stage of a murdery-looking social club with a torch between my teeth because I couldn't be bothered to get my tripod. I'm not scared easily. I thought. This one started, like most of them, with a message. A guy I knew from an urbex Facebook group had posted a blurry photo of a lighthouse out in the fog. Someone had written in the comments, "That's in my town. Just don't," which meant, to people like me, please go and make a video. I'd heard of Corvus Vale, but mostly as a joke. A smallish town dropped into the middle of nowhere. I think it used to be a fishing town, there's a dock, but it just houses flashy speedboats for men going through some sort of midlife crisis now. There's a crescent of gray pebble beach, good for sea glass collecting. A few streets of random shops, and a really nice chip van. It seems very vanilla on the outside, although I have heard it hosts a good anime convention. The woods curl behind the whole town like a sleeping animal, essentially blocking it in. There's one road in and out, making the whole place kind of claustrophobic or cozy, depending on how you look at it. You couldn't pay me to go in those woods. They have their own creepy stories floating about. People say it's pretty in summer if the sun hits right, but every time I've looked it up, it's looked like November. Anyway, there's a bit of lore about the lighthouse. I didn't take it seriously then. I take it seriously now. The story goes that years ago, the harbor master was in debt to something in the sea. People say he made a bargain. He'd lure workers with decent pay and benefits to keep the light going. People that wouldn't be missed. Drifters. Young lads with no family. Women who couldn't say exactly where they were going next. It wasn't a normal job. It's rumored that once you went out there, you didn't come back off. There's no actual proof, obviously. Apparently, this guy was bound to pay tribute, and the tribute was people. That's what they say. I know that sounds like a campfire tale. I would have laughed too. Actually, I did laugh a little when I told Sam. Sam is my best friend and my worst influence. She moved back up north last year and started coming out with me on my adventures to get out of the house. She's the kind of person who can chat to a stranger like they're already mates, which is useful and also terrifying to watch. If I'm the torch, she's the big, stupid grin reflected in the glass. We are polar opposites, and it works great. Worked. We'd both had a terrible week, and we wanted to get away. Corvus Vale, I said, scrolling through photos on my phone as we sat in a Tesco car park, sharing a meal deal like teenage gremlins. We can get away for a bit, do a video, and I take you to that chip van, because nothing beats Jet 2 holiday, she interrupted in her best advert voice, smirking at me from behind her sandwich. Shut up, dickhead, I told her. We cracked up. You had to be there. We set off the next morning, early enough that the roads were empty. The hedgerows were still white with dew. Clouds like damp cotton hung over fields that looked almost foreign without people in them. The last bit of the drive took us through a narrow lane that didn't seem legal for cars. Then the trees opened, and the sea was suddenly there, a long, low line that made my stomach drop in a good way. Corvus Vale didn't look like a real place at first. The town itself is wrapped into a neat little semicircle, the dense woods pressed in close, like they grew tired of standing back and decided to lean in. I counted 3 chip shops, 2 pubs, a charity shop with a single wedding dress in the window, and a post office that had handwritten opening times taped to the door. The woods behind it I don't know how to explain it. I remember thinking it was strange that you couldn't see far into them. The trunks were close together, and even though it wasn't summer, the branches knitted like fingers. But if you maneuvered your head just right, you could see a building in there. I saw a peak of a chimney poking out the top of some of the trees. It must be massive. I'm not going to talk about the stories people tell about those woods, because that wasn't why we were there. It's only to say the place has a way of making you feel watched, even in daylight. The lighthouse is set on a narrow, rocky outcrop a little way from the harbor, just far enough that you can't walk to it unless the tide is weirdly low and you're dying. There's no public ferry. The path that once ran along the rocks is busted in 3 places and signed off with rusted council notice. Danger, boards that look like they're part of the scenery now. The only sensible way is over the water. It took us a minute to figure out how to ask about a boat without saying we were idiots. We strategically asked about the place in 2 shops before going to the harbor. An old woman in a knit hat told us nobody went out there anymore. Too much bother, she said. And then she said the tide breathes funny out here. I didn't ask what that meant. Another guy in a hoodie shook his head and told us the light's dead, love. Which, obviously. We went down to where the boats were tied up. The harbor is a curved arm of concrete, maybe 50 yards long, with low steps that threaten to break your legs if you don't concentrate. There were a few little boats knocked gently against tires. Most of them were clearly used every day. Sam found our man. She always does. He was in his 60s, with a face that had been tightened by wind, not surgery, and hands that looked carved from driftwood. There was a tobacco smell around him that made me think of my granddad. He was easing a length of rope into a coil when Sam walked up and said, "Hiya. Stupid question. Do you ever lend out your boat for filming?" He gave us a look that went from amused to suspicious in about a second. "Depends who's asking," he said. "We're making a documentary," I said quickly. "I make videos about the coast. We wanted to get some footage of the coastline. Just the coastline. The rocks. I've got a GoPro and a couple of vlogging bits. It would be like an hour. We're happy to pay." "Do you know how to sail a boat?" he asked flat. Yes, I lied. Well, not a complete lie. I'd done a weekend course on the Tyne once I was 14 for my Duke of Edinburgh award. It was mostly about not hitting things and what to do if you do hit things. I'd never done it in the sea, and definitely not here. "£50, Sam blurted out. I looked at her with wide eyes that clearly said, "What the fuck?" She just smiled at me. He squinted past us at the water, like it was going to answer for us. "The tide's funny out here," he said. "And the fog. Breathes in and out like it forgets itself. You want to be off the water when it turns. You got, 2 hours tops. You'll get into trouble after that." Sam did the thing where she tilts her head and smiles. "We'll be careful. Promise." He hesitated. I could see him weighing up the effort of arguing versus the effort of making sure we didn't kill ourselves. 60, I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Sam raised her eyebrow and pulled out a wad of folded cash from the little pocket in her jacket and handed it over like we'd planned it. "And your name?" she asked. "Martin," he said. He took the notes and tucked it into his wallet without counting it, which made me like him. He stepped into the small motorboat at the edge of the harbor and showed me where things were. Throttle, choke, pull start, fuel shut off, spare tank, kill cord. He repeated 3 times that we should be back before the tide turned proper. I nodded like a kid getting the keys for the first time. He asked again if I knew what I was doing. I said yes again. I don't think he believed me, but the decision was made. He pushed us off with the heel of his hand, and we bobbed like a duckling that had fallen out of formation. We puttered out, me gripping the tiller harder than necessary, Sam sitting on the bow with her phone poised like a news reporter, the GoPro clamped to a pole, so we looked more professional than we were. The cold came up through the floor of the boat and into my bones in a way I didn't expect. "That was easier than I thought it was going to be," she giggled. "Remind me again," she started, raising her voice over the revving engine, hair whipping. "What?" "We live 34 miles inland," she said. "Why did you learn to sail a boat?" "In case I ever needed to dispose of a body," I said deadpan. She snorted. "You watch too much, Dexter." "Probably." I try to focus on the feel of the water. Rivers are straightforward. They push you one way. The sea is like being in a crowded room with 100 people moving in different directions. You think you're still, and then you look up, and the horizon has shifted. Out past the mouth of the harbor, the fog changed from a light breath to a wall. It rolled in low, in sheets, and then in ropes. I could see the lighthouse sometimes, then I couldn't. Well, I could see it. It was a simple white column with a red cap. From far away, it looked almost clean. Up close, it looked like a long bruise. We slowed as we neared the rocks. There's a small jut of stone that rises like a knuckle below the lighthouse, and on it there's what's left of a dock. 3 posts, 1 ladder, and a gray plank that had seen better days a century ago. I eased us in on the shore side to keep us out of the worst chop. Sam hopped across like she'd done it all her life. I followed, tying us up with a loop that would have made my old instructor squint. We had, as Martin said, about 2 hours to get this done. I kept that in my head like a timer. Sam had the same idea. We get our shots, she said, and we don't be stupid. That's my line, I said. The lighthouse door was unlocked. That surprised me, though I don't know why. There was a heavy metal latch, rusted to an ugly orange, but it wasn't engaged. The door itself weighed more than it looked. It had that damp, swollen feeling like an old paperback that someone dropped in the bath and dried on a radiator. I brought 2 torches, one for me, one for Sam. We knew there wasn't going to be power. We clicked them on, and the beams made little cones through the fog that had somehow crept in. The ground floor was a round room with flaking paint and a metal staircase that spiraled up the inside wall like a ribcage. There were hooks where coats had once hung, and a metal locker with a warped door that wouldn't close. Someone had scrawled "Keep Out" on the inside of the door in marker, which made me roll my eyes. We did the usual. Close-ups, slow walking, me talking to camera in a whisper like somebody could catch us and tell us off, which is always silly when the person who would tell you off has been dead for 30 years. Then we climbed. This is the watch room, I announced to the camera, panning the camera around the room. The ceiling was lower, and a little half window looked out over nothing. The glass was long smashed, and a chilly gust of wind caught me off guard. There was a bed with a narrow metal frame, bolted like everything else, with a thin mattress on it. Somebody had stacked the cushions from the armchair on it, as if weight could make it comfortable. The way you do when you don't have a proper topper. Sam, of course, flopped down on it, because she has no self-preservation around textiles. The mattress let out a groan, and the cushions released a plume of dust into the beam of my torch like a ghost finishing a magic trick. Sam coughed so hard she squeaked. "Gross," she said, half laughing, waving her hand in front of her face. The dust made her eyes water. "Fuck sake, Sam, I've got asthma," I told her with an exaggerated wheeze, dragging her by her sleeve. There were hooks on the wall loaded with thick woolen coats and waterproofs, and a shelf with an old coffee thermos on it. I thought about the person who had washed that thermos each morning by the little sink, looking out at the same patch of sea until they couldn't tell you what day it was. There's a kind of life that slowly erases you. That's what this room felt like. I wonder why they didn't take their stuff. I whispered to no one in particular. "'Cause they all died here, didn't they?" Sam said, nodding her head toward the camera, spelling out "get into fucking character" with her eyes. We climbed again. Metal steps, each one ringing a little underfoot, the sound dented by the fog that seemed to press through cracks you couldn't see. At the top, in the lantern room, the glass was fogged on the inside. That felt wrong. I wiped a circle and smeared it, which just made it look worse. The lantern itself was there, the big lens of Deadeye. It felt like a museum where the signs had fallen down. I could hear, now and then, a noise like a sigh running along the rail outside. We found a notebook. It had been torn up, most of it. Pages ripped, others stuck together with damp and age. We shouldn't have been able to read anything. But there was a blotch, a stain that had soaked through pages and made a brown halo. And in the middle of it, there was one word left, faint as if it had given up fighting the rest of the ink. "Closer." "Spooky," Sam said, leaning her chin on my shoulder. That could mean anything. I checked the time. We had, by my mental math, 20 minutes before I wanted to be back on the boat, which would put us back at the harbor with a smug amount of safety to spare. We did a few last shots of the lantern room, The long, slow pans that make people comment, atmospheric, and chills below the video. I filmed the broken gauge. I filmed the little brass nameplate that had been polished so much in its life that the letters were soft. "All right, let's go," I said. We went down the stairs, our torches wobbling, our feet trying not to slip on edges that had been worn to a shine. I reached the ground floor door and put my hand on the latch. I was already rehearsing how I'd wave at Martin and say, "You were right," and feel like a responsible adult. I pulled the door open and it was night. I don't mean it was darker than it should have been. I don't mean clouds covered the sun and the fog made it seem late. I mean outside the door was black, like somebody had gone behind the sky and switched it to the other setting. The fog wasn't white anymore. It was gray on black, like smoke above coal. The hairs on my arms prickled so hard it hurt. We weren't that long, I said, like time would be convinced if I said it firmly. The cold came in through the door like a living thing. I shut it. My hand shook enough that the latch clicked weirdly. Sam made a face that was halfway between "this is funny" and "this is stupid." "Okay," she said, "that's a problem." We both checked our phones. No bars. Not even a flicker. I moved mine around like a divining rod for a second, then felt ridiculous and put it away. I could taste the fog now. It tasted like old pennies and something sweet that made my tongue curl. It got into my clothes. My torch felt like a candle in a football stadium. "It's fine," Sam said, voice too bright. "She does that. She goes to school when she's scared. We'll just wait. Sleep a bit. Go back at first light. It's not like the boat will float away." We tied it. I looked at the door again like something in it would change. "Martin said the tide turns funny," I said. "He said we get into trouble." "We'll not get into bother. We're safe in here," she said, and I hated that she sounded like she was humoring a child, but I needed it. "Let's go back up. It's less drafty." We went back up to the lantern room, hoping to any god the guy that lent us the boat would send someone looking. The lighthouse creaked. That's the only word. It creaked like a tree in a gale and like an old man getting up from a chair. The sounds came from different places each time. Sometimes above us, sometimes below. Once it came from the outside rail, and my mouth went dry so fast I almost gagged. "Maybe there's a foghorn," Sam said, poking at a lever on the wall near the stairs. "If we can get it going, someone might hear." "Don't," I said, but I said it too late. She pulled the lever like she'd been waiting her whole life for a dramatic moment. There was a heartbeat of silence, like a sucked breath. The horn sounded. It wasn't a modern sound. It wasn't that neat, low bellow you get now on ships that sounds like something designed on a computer. It was raw. It was a brass instrument being strangled by the sea. It tore itself out of the lighthouse and into the fog, and the fog swallowed it and hurled it back at us from everywhere. It made my teeth hurt. It felt like someone had pressed an invisible hand to the back of my head and pushed. It echoed off nothing and everything. It didn't just ring in the air, it went through us. We clutched each other without looking like children who don't want to admit they're scared. "Okay," Sam said, over the last shuddering tail of the sound. "Maybe don't do that again." Then the light came on. I didn't know it could. The lantern roared to life. The beam hit the fog and made a white world that moved, and then it swung. It swung like it had always swung, in a long, patient sweep, and with each pass the fog was cut into layers that made shapes. Shapes! I wish I didn't write that. I wish I could say I was imagining things. But the light made figures in the mist. Not silhouettes you could explain away as rocks or sea spray. They moved wrong, and then too right, like people who'd forgotten how to be bodies and were relearning in front of us. With each pass of a light, they crept closer, jittering and jarring, limbs moving all wrong. Sam swore softly. "Shit, turn it off," she said, frantically searching for a switch. No lever anything. We tried the same lever she'd pulled for the horn. The horn stayed quiet, thank God, but the light kept on, unbothered. We tried another lever, and a hand wheel that felt like it was welded to the past. The light ignored us. I could feel the heat of it against my face, and it made the fog sweat. We scrambled down again, to the living floor, where the little window sat like an eye that had been punched. There was a white feather on the sill. It moved in the draft like a twitching finger. A bird landed on the sill. "I swear to you, I know what a gull looks like." I know what a pigeon looks like. I know what a crow looks like. This was a crow, but not black. It was white, not albino with red eyes. While like someone had dipped a crow in milk and set it dry. It had a scar on its beak, a little roughness that made it look like it had been welding at some point and didn't care much for PP. It looked in at us, cocked its head, and cawed once. That sound went through the lighthouse and into my spine. It was like the horn, but small. It echoed down the metal bones. It made the lights sweep hitch, just a fraction. I hate that I am writing this because I know how I sound, but the bird looked at me like it knew what was going to happen. It was aware. It fluffed its feathers, shook itself, and hopped to the side so it could watch the stairs. We both stood very still. There were footsteps below us, not the creaks and groans of old bolts shifting. Footsteps, a set of them, not hurrying, not dragging. They sounded like somebody who was used to the stairs and knew exactly where to put their feet. One step, pause. Another step, slow, methodical. It's just the wind, Sam said, very softly. I'm going to see if there's a manual kill on the light. Like a breaker. There has to be. Don't, I said, but I couldn't make my mouth say anything sensible. I'd like to tell you I was brave, and I grabbed a thing, and I went with her. I didn't. My legs just stopped belonging to me. She grabbed a wrench from near the door, the kind you use to bully pipework. If I don't find anything, I'll just smack the shit out of it, point two, she said, trying to sound brave. She was shaking but trying not to. She looked at me like she wanted me to be the sane one, and I failed her. Stay, she said. Call if you see anything. I nodded, useless. She went to the stairs and went up. Her footsteps made their own rhythm, and for a few seconds it covered the other footsteps, and I felt better. Then hers faded as she went higher, and the other steps kept coming. I backed up toward the wall like you do in a horror film right before the thing happens. My torch trembled, the beam catching on flakes of paint and making them look like eyes. The white crow watched the stairs with more attention than I have ever given anything. It made a small noise in its throat. I've never heard a crow make a small noise before. I heard Sam above me, metal-on-metal noises, a swear, a clatter like a panel being opened. Got it, she called, breathless. I think. There's a... Her voice cut off. Not like someone pressed mute. Like somebody put a hand over her mouth, but through her voice. There was the sound of something struggling. A scuff. The footsteps below sped up. I ran up the stairs after Sam. I yelled her name. I yelled until my throat hurt. There was a sound like metal bending where metal shouldn't bend, and then there was a scream. It wasn't long. That's the thing that replays. It wasn't a cinematic long wail. It was a short, furious, scared sound. It was a human sound. Sam, I screamed, scrambling up the stairs on my hands as my legs were jelly. The light went out. I stopped dead. I couldn't. Fear overtook my body, and I froze. All sound muted. It felt like someone had pressed pause, and even the sound of the crashing waves ceased. I don't know how long I stood there. I think I said no a lot, quietly like you bargain with a pet that's about to be sick on your carpet. While I could make my legs work, I went up. I kept the torch pointed exactly where my feet were going, terrified I'd see something. Anything other than Sam. The lantern room was empty. The panel near the floor that had looked bolted shut was open now, and the inside of it smelled like hot dust. There was nothing to see. That should have been better. It wasn't. Sam, I said, so quietly it would have been impossible for anyone to hear me. I moved the torch slowly across the floor. Nothing. She was gone. I don't remember much after that. I know I touched the lantern glass, and it was cold, like it was never on. I remember checking the rails to see if she had gone over. I think I went back down after that. My memory has blanks in it that shouldn't be blanks. I remember the feel of the wrench in my hand because I picked it up even though I didn't know what I thought I would do with it. I remember opening the door to the outside for 1 second and the night hitting me like a door in my face. I remember closing it again. I remember opening the door again, and it wasn't night anymore. The fog was still there, but thinner. I went outside, and the boat was still tied where we left it. I untied it with hands that didn't feel like mine, and I climbed in, and I turned the engine over, and I went back, and I didn't look behind me because I couldn't make myself. Martin was there when I came back in. He was smoking. He looked at me, at my face, at the boat without Sam in it, at the time on his battered watch. "Where's your mate?" he asked, voice very neutral, the way nurses talk when they're trying to get you to say the thing before they go get a doctor. I opened my mouth, and whatever I said wasn't useful. I think I said stairs 3 times. He put his cigarette out on the heel of his boot and helped me tie up like I had never seen a rope before. He put a hand on my shoulder, and it was the first warm thing that had touched me in hours. "Come on," he said, and he took me to the harbor office that had a kettle and a beige phone. I told him everything. The night is the lighthouse, the figures, the footsteps. "Sam, you've been gone for 46 minutes, pedal," he said with a sigh. "If I'd have known you were going to that damned lighthouse, I wouldn't have given you the boat." I wish I could tell you what happened next was heroic. I wish I could tell you there was a search that filled news bulletins for 3 days and divers with little lights combed the rocks and found something that could be put in a box and named. I wish I could tell you there was a report with conclusions that felt like anything but paper. The harbor master in Corvus Vale is a different man than the one from the stories. He was kind to me. He took me seriously. He said he believed me. As he listened, he took quick, disapproving glances at Martin, like he was scolding him with his eyes. "I'm sorry this happened to you," he said. "I'll file a report. Say she fell overboard." "What?" I exclaimed. "Weren't you listening?" "She didn't." "It doesn't matter," he said grimly. "Your friend isn't coming back. It's time you thought of yourself. And this is the only way you'll stay out of Beacon Point." "Beacon what?" "It doesn't matter. Listen, if it makes you feel a bit better, I'll go out myself. I'll have a look around the rocks and see if I can spot anything." "In the lighthouse." "No one's going in that lighthouse," he shot back. He sounded frightened. "Then I'll come back, and we can work on something to tell your own authorities when you go home." He said that they were 2 different things, his world and ours. It didn't find Sam. Back home, they asked me to come to the station. I made a statement. I made 3 statements. I repeated the route we took. They asked the questions people ask when someone goes missing. Did she argue with you? Did she drink? Did she take anything? Does she swim? I wanted at some point to stand up and walk until my legs fell off. Instead, I signed my name on a line, and the paper took it like that meant anything. I want to tell you I was brave, that I sat there and spilled my guts about the missing time, the footsteps, the light, everything. But I didn't. I lied. I lied to save my own arse because I found out what he meant by Beacon Point. I didn't think anything of it then, but I do now. I think it was a threat. If I opened my mouth and started a proper investigation, he would have me committed, and to be honest, it wouldn't have been hard. Everything I've told you sounds completely batshit crazy. So I did nothing, and nothing happened. I know what you want from me if you've read this far. You want the explanation. You want the thing that makes the fog make sense. You want the reason the light came on. You want the rational thing about old capacitors holding charge and currents and unseasonable weather patterns. You want me to say I saw a man, and he pushed her. You want me to say she slipped, and the sea took her like it takes people every year who aren't paying attention. I can give you some of that. She could have slipped. It is a real possibility. There were wet spots on the metal. She could have put her foot wrong in a place that forgives nobody. But the part one can't get away from is this. When the light came on, the fog moved like people. And somebody walked down those stairs who wasn't my friend. Here is the part one haven't told anyone in real life, because I do want to be taken seriously, and I know this will make some people move me into the unhelpful file. 2 nights after I came home, I woke up because a horn sounded in my dream. It was the same sound, the strangled brass. I sat up in bed with my heart trying to push itself out through my throat. The room was dark. The window cracked because the heating makes me sweat. I got up and shut it, and as I did, something white flashed on the roof opposite, just a bob. A bird taking off. I didn't see it clearly enough to say more. I'm not an expert. I'm not even a good storyteller. I'm just someone who wanted to make a silly video and came home without my friend. People will tell you the sea doesn't want anything, that it doesn't think. Maybe. The lighthouse did what it always did. It turned and it called. It brought things closer. It took what it was owed or what it believed it was owed, and we were there and we were easy. So, if you're an urban explorer, please be smarter than me. Don't go out there. Not to Corvus Vale. Not to that lighthouse. And if you're reading this and you're from Corvus Vale and you know anything, I'm asking you, please. Even if it's a stupid old story. even if it's just where to take flowers that will mean something. I'll drive back. I'll stand there and feel stupid, and I'll do it gladly. I will go back if someone tells me how to make it right. I'm not brave. I'm not a hero. I just want my friend. I don't know if posting this will help. Maybe someone will say, I know what happened. Maybe someone will tell me a version of events that lets me exhale. Maybe nothing. I want you to be careful out there. If you go to Corvus Vale for chips and a walk, and you see the fog roll and where the woods kiss the town, and the sea leans and like it's whispering, go home. Don't be brave. Don't be me. If you got questions, I'll try to answer them. If you want to tell me I did everything wrong, you're probably right. If you want to tell me that I should have gone up those stairs and grabbed her and dragged her down, that you would have, I know. I tell myself that every night. The last thing I'll say is this. If you go to the harbor and you meet a man named Martin, be kind to him. He tried. He didn't have to lend us his boat. He didn't have to believe me. He did. I think he knows more than he says. I think he is doing the maths of his own life, like all of us, and I don't want the sum to crush him. I'm going to hit post now before I delete this in fear of being sectioned or some shit. If you're the kind of person who likes to put pins in maps, don't put one in Corvus Vale. Let be a blank spot. Let go back to being a photo you scroll past. Let the light stay off. Let the fog keep what it took. If I hear anything, I'll update. If I don't, please remember her name. Sam Pencott. She was funny and she was kind, and she lay on a disgusting cushion pile bed without thinking because she wanted to make me laugh, and she did. I love you, Sam. I'm sorry. Story 9. A crew is missing on the Green Creek fire. 18 days have passed since we departed from our home station. Me, Tyler, Isaac, our operator Vaughn, and our Captain James all loaded up into our Type 3 fire engine and made our way for our assignment to Central Washington. The Green Creek fire had grown from 1,000 acres with a low spread potential to over 30,000 acres in just a matter of days. Our first week consisted of vigorous mop-up, digging, cutting, and drowning any residual heat out of the wasteland the flames had left behind. Certainly not the most glamorous work, but we were used to it. This was my second year in fire, and the beautiful landscape of trees, mountains, and streams that Washington had to offer sure beat the desert scenery that we were used to back home. On day 8, we were informed during briefing that a hand crew of 18 people were missing. They were working on one of the most active flanks of the fire and had not been seen since the previous day. Overnight, various attempts to contact them and other crews forming search parties had no luck in locating the crew. The pickup trucks that they arrived in were parked in a safe area, a short hike away from where that began work that day. Fatalities sometimes happen, and we often study and learn from incidents in which individuals or crews are lost in fires. I've been on fires where people got injured, but nothing like this. Some of the crew's gear had been found burned over in the area they were working, but no bodies, which gave everyone hope that they may just be lost. Needless to say, we had been told to keep an eye out, and hopefully they would turn up. It was on day 9 that we were told by our division leader that we would be reassigned to help hold a burning operation on the most active flank of the fire. This usually meant standing on a road while a hand crew takes drip torches in a line to burn off everything on the side that is threatening to burn past the road. Meanwhile, as an engine crew, we make sure that if anything catches on the opposite side, we can put it out quickly and ensure that the burn won't get out of hand. The burn began around 1930, and the familiar burn of smoke in my throat was a generous way to take me out of my sleep-deprived state. I stayed with the hose for about an hour, watching into the green on my left for embers that might escape into the brush. The occasional tree would ignite, causing a surge of adrenaline to fuel my body and give me an excuse to enjoy spraying the hose. After giving Isaac and Tyler some time on the nozzle, and the 3 of us taking turns assisting with the burn, it had become dark out. The development of the missing crew left a haze over everyone, and every radio transmission of the search parties was listened to intently in hopes that they might bring good news. Things would wrap up for the night around 0000, and we had progressed almost 2 miles. As the burn was coming to an end, I stood nozzle in hand, looking out into the dark forest on my left, only barely illuminated by the flames on my right. I became transfixed on a pair of antlers peeking out from a brush. They moved only slightly, bobbing up and down. They were too far away to see clearly, and the flames cast light on them in an inconsistent way that made them even more difficult to focus on. I thought to grab the attention of Vaughn from the driver's seat, but his focus was on the burn to the right. As I looked back towards the antlers, they had come closer. The bizarre fact was I couldn't see the head they were attached to. The brush was tall, but a buck should have stood taller. This bothered me because it was as if somehow the animal was sneaking through the bushes as if it were a predator. Not to mention deer cannot move in that way. I became more unnerved the closer they came. From where I first spotted them, the darkness left room for my eyes to deceive me, but the closer they came, I began to see more clearly. Instead of the plump, tall figure of a deer, I could only see the antlers barely protruding from above the bushes, slowly swaying left and right in a hypnotic dance. I was transfixed, and as they weaved in between the brush and the tree trunks, fear shot throughout my body like I had never felt it before. From around 50 yards away, I saw a slender, human-like hand reach out and grasp onto a tree limb, followed by a humanoid body slightly visible now above the brush. For one moment, I could see it entirely, its arms and legs too long for a normal human, and its grotesque, naked body stood abnormally tall, and at its head was a buck skull worn as if it were a mask. In an instant, it was gone, and from deep within the trees, I heard it scream like a man's voice mixed with an animalistic tone of despair and grief that I could never forget. I didn't sleep until 2 days later when the exhaustion of working 16 hours a day caught up to me. I was quiet for the rest of the assignment and incredibly sleep-deprived. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, and I knew that nobody would believe me if I did. I tried to rationalize and shrug it off as my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. After days of endlessly thinking about what I had experienced, our assignment was over and we were heading home. During our drive on the second day, James found a news article that revealed the crew had been found, all dead. The official report stated that they had been killed by wildlife, according to their injuries, and were found 2 miles away from where they had been. Everyone tried to make sense of how 18 people could have died the way they did and what kind of animal could have done that. I've never heard of anything capable of doing that, but I believe I may have seen what was responsible that night. Story 10. My town changed in a month, and I don't recognize it anymore. I swear I'm not crazy, but I've been watching my town change, and it feels like I've been thrown 100 years into the future. When I was a boy, the streets were dirt, and children played stickball till dusk. You could hear the crack of bats and the laughter of neighbors from one end of Main Street to the other. Farmers sold eggs and apples at the roadside. Horses clopped past, wagons rattled, and the tallest building in town was the library, 3 proud stories with stained glass windows on the top floor. Everyone walked. It was the simplest thing in the world. To the bakery, to church, to the grocer. You could greet half the town just by strolling 2 blocks. But then, all at once, things began to change. The first week, the dirt roads were scraped smooth and covered in black stone. The footpath under the maples, the one we all took to the market, was plowed under. Progress, the mayor called it. The market itself was rebuilt farther away. Nobody minded, except me, when I realized the walk was twice as long. By the second week, the road had doubled, then doubled again. Yesterday, 2 wagons could pass side by side. Today, 6 roaring lanes of machines shot past. Crossing felt like standing before a firing squad. A boy named Samuel didn't make it across. The drivers only blasted their horns, as if he had no right to be there. The buildings changed next. The library once had colored glass windows on the 3rd floor. I remember climbing the stairs with my father. But one morning it was only a squat brick box, flat and windowless. Margaret's house lost its 2nd story overnight. People just shrugged. And then some buildings didn't just shrink, they vanished. The post office, the drugstore, the old theater. One evening they were there. By morning, the lots were flat, striped in paint. Nobody even mentioned the loss. Main Street didn't mourn either. The family businesses went under, one by one. The tailor, the bakery, the toy shop. I thought there would be grief, but instead people smiled. They said, "It's fine, there's a bigger store 20 minutes away." They said like it was good news, like it made things easier. Even the shopkeepers, faces pale in their empty storefronts, forced stiff little smiles and nodded, as if it were all for the best. It was the smiles that unsettled me most. The corner store went differently. I woke one night to see a crowd standing outside it. They didn't shout. They didn't argue. They just pressed their hands to the brick. The walls creaked like something alive under strain. By sunrise, the store was gone. The ground was smooth and black. Mr. Alvarez was gone too. When I asked about him, people turned their faces away. Even the houses began to twist. Where there had once been little walkways leading from front doors to the street, the paths bent sideways overnight. Now, they lead only to the driveways. Step out your door, and you're steered straight to a car. The houses themselves seem to drift back a little farther each night. 10 feet. 20. In some cases, you can barely see them from the street anymore. Voices don't carry that far, and the lawns keep stretching. I remember when Mr. Dawson pushed his mower while whistling, and Mrs. Henson swung her scythe like her father before her. The yards were small, the work quick. Now they look like fields. Nobody mows on foot anymore. They ride little machines across endless grass that wasn't so big yesterday. From a distance, the riders look like toys circling endlessly. The children are gone too, not gone, but hidden. They used to play stickball on the street, chalk lines drawn across the pavement, shouts echoing through the block. Now, whenever an engine sounds, mothers rush out and yank them inside. Doors slam, curtains snap shut. The way the street empties reminds me of an old western right before a gunfight. Except this happens every day. The strangest moment was when I was walking home one evening. I saw the Dawsons on their porch. When they noticed me coming down the street, they froze. Mrs. Dawson clutched her husband's arm. His face was tight with fear until I came close enough for him to recognize me. "Oh," he said, almost laughing. "It's only you. We thought it was somebody else." They didn't say who, but the way they hurried inside after, shutting the door tight, I knew. Around here, anyone walking is treated like a danger. I tried walking toward the edge of town last week to see if the farms were still there. Mr. Whitaker used to sell apples and eggs from a stand by the road. My kids loved his fruit, but when I reached the spot, there were only neat houses and driveways. No barn, no stand, not even a fence post. A man watering his lawn frowned when he saw me lingering. "You're lost," he said flatly. Then he turned, and his garage door closed behind him. And my friends are changing too. James once walked everywhere with his daughter, pointing out the old shops. He was the kindest soul I knew, but the first time I saw him behind the wheel, he nearly struck me in the crosswalk. He didn't wave. He didn't apologize. He leaned on the horn and sped so close I felt the heat of his engine. That wasn't James anymore. By the fourth week, I was the only one left walking. The streets roared with iron and smoke. The trees were gone. The porches were empty. Even the old dirt path to downtown has been erased. Where it once began, a new sign stands, and no trespassing. This means you. I could see downtown just across the grass, close enough to touch. But I couldn't reach it. And now it's at my door. This morning the sidewalk was gone. My steps lead straight into 12 lanes of traffic. If I want to eat, I'll have to try to cross. I don't know if I'll make it back alive. The strangest thing is that everyone else seems happy. If you ever hear construction outside your window, if you ever wake to find the street wider than it was yesterday, don't stay. Run. Story 11. Ratwitch. When Dad got sick and went to the hospital, my sister asked me to take over the building he managed while he was gone. I thought it would be simple. Collect rent, fix the occasional leak, check on tenants. The building wasn't much, an old 5-story brick place with peeling paint in the halls. Some days it looked gray. Other days a sickly yellow that made the fluorescent lights harsher. Dad lived in an apartment in the basement, always tinkering with boilers and patching pipes. It smelled of rust, dust, and something sour like wet rags left too long. I got bored and decided to repaint his apartment as a surprise. Moving paint cans, I found a small leather-bound book wedged behind shelf. It was worn and dusty. The pages smelled of mold and ink. At first the entries were ordinary: tenants, repairs, notes about the building. Then came the passages about the rat. The author, apparently the super of the apartment building years ago, wrote of shadows scuttling in the basement, a rat with strangely human eyes appearing in impossible places, on high shelves, behind walls with no holes. Traps never worked. Once he found a trap wedged between walls where no space existed. Another time, he found one of his traps that held a severed finger in place of the cheese he had baited it with. The diary devolved into spirals of symbols and glyphs that seemed strangely familiar to me as I stared. Where had I seen those symbols before? Then it struck me. I remembered my university days studying non-Euclidean geometry. The patterns obeyed a twisted logic. Curious, I took the book to my old math professor, Dr. Langley. She looked at the symbols, murmuring, "These aren't random. They describe structures, not in 3 dimensions. Something else." She asked to borrow the diary for study, which I reluctantly allowed. Back in the basement, after stripping paint from the walls, I saw faint symbols etched beneath. They matched the diary's markings. Near the boiler, I caught sight of a rat, its eyes disturbingly human for a moment. I shook it off as fumes playing with my imagination and opened some windows to air out the place. Nevertheless, I laid out a few traps and baited them. Days later, Dr. Langley called me to her office again. She spread the diary open, dark circles under her eyes. These described spaces of at least 13 dimensions. Not just describing, but shaping them. She faltered, as if they were more than just theory, actual doors in the fabric of space. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but whoever wrote this journal apparently believed just that. The math here is incredibly complex. The next morning as I checked the traps, I gasped. The bait had been removed from one of the traps, and a small gold ring was placed onto the mechanism, as if the rat were trying to bait me. I racked my brain all day trying to figure out who or what had done that. Later in the night, as I crawled into bed, there came a muffled snap beneath my blanket. An empty trap had just missed my toes. A shadow fled back into the walls. My phone rang. It was Dr. Langley. I found something, a warning note in the binding. She asked to meet again, but this time at a cafe near the university where she taught. In the cafe, she explained, the symbols at the back of the book weren't decorations, but sequences that, in theory, open cracks in the fabric of space. The diary's author described things he couldn't comprehend intellectually, but nevertheless had an intuitive understanding of the complex symbols. She whispered, "Your building isn't just old. It's porous." I walked home deep in thought. Later, my sister called. "Dad's taken a turn. Come to the hospital quickly." When I saw him, he looked gray, smaller than I remembered. He stirred and coughed dryly. He rasped, "It's the eyes, don't look at them." His words clung to me as I returned to the building. Back at the apartment, I noticed the traps had shifted. Then I saw the rat, its red eyes staring back at me, unblinking. Then it fled into a dark corner, disappearing. I walked over to where the rat appeared and saw on the floor a chalk circle etched on the wood, with symbols, sharp and deliberate. Within the circle, a faint outline of a door appeared. Heart hammering, I pried it open with a crowbar. Beneath the door, a staircase spiraled down into darkness. I descended. The air grew heavy, metallic. The stairs wound deeper than the building should allow until the passage opened into a large cavern. At the far end stood a black stone altar carved with more impossible symbols. Pressure throbbed in my skull as I stared. I turned to leave. For a moment, the beam cut across the altar and something small crouched there, tail curling. 2 bright eyes fixed on me. Then they were gone. I sealed the trapdoor at the top and called Dr. Langley. I told her about the door appearing where none had been before. Is it possible for the symbols to manifest space? She hesitated. In theory, yes. She wanted to see it and asked me to call her later. I agreed and hung up. That night I tried again. "Hello." Someone answered. I didn't recognize the voice. "I'd like to speak to Dr. Langley," I said. "It's important. This is her daughter, Anna. Mother was bitten by a rat and seems to have an infection. She's in serious condition in the hospital." "Is this in regards to the notebook she was looking at?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Anna's voice shook as she told me her mother had explained to her what the notebook meant. Everyone who had been in contact with a rat got sick. Worse, the number of infections seemed to be increasing around the world. The creature was somehow able to spread the disease worldwide, but its means of transmission was a mystery. They could find no identifiable vector. Her mother believed the rat was somehow using the drawings on the walls to cross vast distances and spread the disease. Unless it was stopped, the disease would spread like the Black Death. I thought of my father burning with fever. What does she suggest we do? I asked. We need to find the animal and kill it, Anna snapped. Mom's instructions were to trap the rat at the altar to prevent it from using the other dimensions to escape. Meet me tonight, I said, and gave her directions to the apartment. Together we would try to lure the rat down to the altar and put an end to it. We met at my apartment. Anna was an attractive young lady about my age, dark hair, slender, but obviously fit. I showed her the stairs leading down to the altar. The crypt waited. Together we descended the stairs to the altar. The silence was suffocating. Finally, we reached the bottom and walked over to the altar. Now, how do we lure that animal down here? She asked. I tapped her shoulder and pointed to the staircase we had just descended. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I pointed my flashlight to the stairs, and there at the bottom stood a large rat with human-like eyes. Worse, it had at least a couple hundred of its buddies, and they were all looking at us. What do we do now? I asked as the mass of these furry nightmares began to approach us like an army with our rat at the head. Look, she said, above the altar. She pointed her flashlight above the altar at a small crawl space. Hurry, climb up into that alcove quickly. You first, I insisted, then me. There was no time to argue, and I was just clearing the altar as the rats swarmed below. Soon they were in a frenzy on the altar and leaping at my boots. We climbed into the crawl space above the altar where a tight passage appeared, and we proceeded on our hands and knees. After a long, tight crawl, the passage opened into a chamber. At its center stood a glass dome. Inside were two thin, greenish human-like beings. They shrank back. Then one whispered, "Help us." "Who are you?" I asked. 2 centuries ago, the alien said, we were part of an exploration starship exploring this part of the galaxy when our ship crashed. We were the only 2 of a dozen crew members who survived. We were badly injured and should not have survived ourselves, but a kind young woman found us in the forest and brought us back to her village to treat our injuries. In gratitude for her kindness, we showed her some of our science, how to use the outer dimensions to travel quickly anywhere in the world. But soon we noticed a change in her. She became cruel towards her neighbors. She was using our science to punish those who called her a witch. When we learned this, we refused to teach her more. She grew furious and used what she had learned to trap us here. We weren't allowed to grow stronger nor to starve. We have been in this limbo for 2 centuries now. At one point, we gathered what strength we had between us and tried to use our science to kill her. We would have, but the last moment her soul escaped into the body of a rat. Anna's breath caught. The rat witch. How do we free you? I asked. Sunlight, he rasped. Open the hole above. Only then can we break free. But the rats, Anna began. We'll never get out that way. There are hundreds of them on the altar. We wouldn't stand a chance. You won't need to. The alien pointed to chalk in the corner. Draw what we tell you. For half an hour, I traced symbols on the wall. With the last stroke, the stone rippled into a hole. We crawled through and found ourselves outside in the sunlight above a small pit. I ran back to the apartment for picks and shovels my father kept. For 2 days we dug until sunlight pierced down onto the dome. The moment the light touched them, the beings stirred, their strength returning. With a crack, they shattered the glass. A piercing shriek tore from the basement. I spun back toward the building just as the lead rat staggered into view, its eyes burning with hate. Sunlight struck its fur and smoke hissed upward. It writhed, twisting unnaturally, then collapsed. For a heartbeat, the air smelled of scorched hair and something older, fouler. Then it was gone. The swarm broke, scattering into shadow. The witch's hold was broken. That evening my phone rang. First the hospital, then another number. Both my father and Anna's mother had made miraculous recoveries. The fever had lifted, the infection gone. Specialists were baffled. We knew why. Anna and I walked through the city in silence, the street lights buzzing overhead. At last, she slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was strong, steady. We didn't speak of the dome, the witch, or the sunlight that burned and healed. Some secrets bound us tighter than words. Weeks passed. People often asked how we could afford the seemingly endless travel. Rome one week, the Great Wall the next. We smiled and said we'd won the lottery. The truth was simpler, stranger. When we needed money, we could step into any vault and fill our pockets. Maybe not the most moral lifestyle, but after what we'd faced, the world owed us. Besides, more than one homeless person woke to find a gold Krugerrand in their tent this morning. We did what we could. Even now, as I look back on those nights in the basement, I wonder whether the shadows are truly gone or only waiting. But I know this, Anna, and I no longer mistake the ordinary for safe.